Why is it that those who seem to be drowning in abundance, those with riches, homes across continents, and portfolios that never sleep, often speak about money as if it's a shadow behind them, while those struggling to make ends meet can barely breathe under its weight? This video is not about money in the conventional sense. It's not about savings or tips for getting rich. It's about meaning. It's about a strange paradox. Those who need money the least seem to end up with the most, and those who need it the most are constantly chasing it. Think about this. The wealthiest people on earth didn't start as billionaires trying to make rent. Often, they became rich doing something they didn't do for the money. Elon Musk didn't build Tesla because he wanted to be rich. He wanted to colonize Mars. Oprah didn't become a media icon to make money. She wanted to tell stories and change lives. And yet, look across the world and you'll see millions of people working 12-hour shifts, stuck in cycles of debt, unable to afford a single emergency, locked into a system that promises freedom through money but delivers chains. This video is an emotional, philosophical, and psychological journey through this paradox. We'll look at the psychology behind needing versus attracting wealth, the societal systems that profit from your desperation, how the myth of meritocracy hides real economic traps, and most importantly, what can be done about it. So let's begin. The invisible script. How society trains us to need money from birth. Most of us are handed a script. Go to school, get good grades, get a job, work hard, retire someday. What's the subtext of this story? That your worth is measured by your productivity and your survival depends on money. This invisible script is so powerful that we rarely question it. It seeps into children's cartoons, school curriculums, job interviews, even our self-worth. We are taught to see money not as a tool, but as the goal of life. This conditioning doesn't happen by accident. It's not a conspiracy, at least not one controlled by people twirling mustaches behind the scenes. It's systemic. Consider. Advertising teaches you that happiness is purchased. Education systems teach you to follow, not question. Corporate culture teaches you to trade time for survival, and when you need money, it becomes harder to take risks, to think freely, to create art, to innovate, because you're in survival mode. Ironically, the people who escape this trap, the ones who don't need money anymore, are often those who once had the privilege to not be obsessed with it in the first place. They could afford to focus on impact over income, passion over paycheck, meaning over materialism. And this leads us to the next point, the psychology of detachment. Why needing less attracts more. There's a profound truth in spiritual and psychological philosophy. Attachment creates suffering. From the Buddha to modern psychologists like Carl Jung and Viktor Frankl, the message is echoed. The more we cling to outcomes, especially money, the more we live in fear. Think of your own life. Have you ever felt desperate for a job and somehow the job slipped away? Have you ever been in a relationship where your neediness drove the other person away? Have you ever noticed how those who seem indifferent to wealth often have it anyway? This isn't magic, it's mindset. People who don't need money radiate something different. They make decisions based on curiosity, not desperation. They take risks others can't afford to. They play the long game rather than chasing quick wins. When you detach from money emotionally, it doesn't mean you stop earning it. It means you stop being owned by it. This is the quiet power of people like Warren Buffett, who still lives in the same house he bought decades ago, or monks who reject wealth yet attract followers who donate millions. Detachment doesn't mean poverty. It means psychological freedom. And freedom is the soil in which great ideas grow. When you need less, you are open to more. Real wealth is time, not money. Let's say you make $1 million, but you work 80 hours a week, have no time for your kids, and can't sleep without pills. Are you rich? Now imagine a man who earns just enough to live simply. He walks with his daughter to school, paints in the afternoons, spend Sundays reading and watching the sky change color. Who is wealthier? We have confused money with freedom. But in truth, money is only a symbol of value, not value itself. Real wealth is on time you control, health you maintain, relationships you trust, a mind that isn't constantly anxious. And yet society tricks us. It tells us to trade time for money, and then spend that money trying to buy back the time we lost. But here's what happens. You burn out, you miss birthdays, you age faster, and you forget why you started earning in the first place. People who don't need money realize something vital. Time is the only currency that can't be earned back, and so they structure their lives to protect it. They don't say yes to every job. They don't fear saying no. They live with intention. This mindset shift is not easy, but once you feel the difference between a rich bank account and a rich life, you never see wealth the same way again. The energy of detachment. You only lose what you cling to. Buddha. There's a strange kind of freedom that arises when you stop grasping at things. When money is no longer the goal but simply a byproduct, it loses its control over you. Detachment isn't about not caring. It's about not being controlled. Think of the artist who paints not for likes or sales but because they have to. Because it pours out of them like breath. Now compare that to the desperate content creator calculating every post for virality. Burning out, chasing the algorithm, never arriving. Real success tends to follow those who have the audacity to pursue value without obsessing over reward. Ironically, those who are most magnetic to wealth are the ones who don't chase it. They create value instead. They serve others instead. They solve real problems instead. Philosopher Hubert Dreyfus once spoke about absorbed coping, the idea that we are at our best when we are deeply immersed in a task, losing ourselves in the process rather than fixating on the outcome. Detachment is exactly that. You become so involved in the value you're bringing to the world that the results, money, fame, praise, become side effects. Steve Jobs didn't create Apple to get rich. He wanted to put a dent in the universe. Elon Musk didn't launch Tesla just for money. He saw a planetary crisis. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care too deeply to be shallow. There's a story of a young man who quit his high-paying corporate job to become a teacher. His peers laughed. You're walking away from 6 figures? But years later, this same man founded an education startup, innovated learning platforms, and ended up with more money and fulfillment than anyone else from his graduating class. Why? Because he wasn't chasing the dollar. He was chasing purpose. And money followed. Moral. Detachment is not disinterest. It is transcendence. You're no longer owned by the game. And ironically, that's when you start winning it, when needing becomes a trap. The more you need something, the more it owns you. Chuck Palahniuk. Need is the root of suffering, but not because need is bad, rather because unchecked need becomes desperation, and desperation repels what it chases. Let's take a look at dating. Someone who is desperate for love often pushes others away. Their neediness overwhelms. But someone who is secure, curious, and whole on their own is naturally magnetic. People are drawn to calm energy. It's the same with money. When you need it, you enter survival mode. Your decisions become short-sighted. Your energy becomes frantic. In capitalism, need is weaponized. Corporations profit by keeping you in a state of lack. Not just physical, but emotional. You're not pretty enough. Buy this. You're not rich enough. Take this course. You're not productive enough. Subscribe now. Needing becomes an identity, and identity becomes a prison. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han talks about this in The Burnout Society. We're no longer being exploited by others when we exploit ourselves. We hustle because we feel we are not enough. But where does this story end? A man in his 30s spent 10 years trying to make it as a YouTuber. He copied every trend, studied every thumbnail, optimized every keyword. But it wasn't until he let go, started making videos about things he actually cared about, stopped worrying about monetization, that his channel exploded. The moment he stopped needing to go viral, he became real. And that's what people responded to. Moral. When needing becomes your identity, it becomes a trap. But when you create from fullness instead of hunger, the world leans in. The silent wealth of enough. Being rich is having money. Being wealthy is having time. Stephen Swid. Enough is a powerful word. It's where peace begins. In modern society, enough is almost considered weak. We're told to never settle, keep grinding, outwork the competition. But what if true power is in knowing when to stop, when to say, I am okay, I have enough? The irony is that the people who have the most often feel the least satisfied. The billionaire obsessed with becoming a trillionaire, the influencer who cries over analytics, the professional with 3 homes and no joy. Now contrast that with a humble person living in a quiet town, working a simple job, spending time with loved ones, walking in nature. They may not have riches, but they are not poor. They are free. Free from the need to impress, free from status anxiety, free to enjoy their existence. In Being and Time, Heidegger points out that most of us are not truly living. We're merely existing in a state of idle talk, distraction, and they-self. We're living for what others expect. But the one who has enough and knows it returns to their authentic self. A retired nurse once told her granddaughter, I never made more than $50,000 a year. But I had my garden, my friends, and my health. That was my wealth. Today, that granddaughter is a tech entrepreneur, but she keeps her grandma's photo on her desk, a reminder that enough is not a ceiling. It is a sanctuary. Moral. Enough is the new luxury. It doesn't shout. It doesn't show off. But it is the only kind of wealth that cannot be taken away. The paradox of financial freedom. When money stops being about survival, freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. Epictetus. There's a term often thrown around in financial circles, financial freedom. It usually means having enough money to do what you want, when you want. But in truth, most people chasing financial freedom are slaves to money in disguise. They check crypto charts at midnight. They obsess over passive income. They sacrifice health, family, and soul for a future they're too exhausted to enjoy. Contrast that with the person who lives modestly, needs little, and spends their time wisely. That person may have a fraction of the net worth, but they wake up free. Why? Because real freedom is not about how much you have, it's about how little you need. A minimalist couple living in a van travels across continents, makes under $40,000 a year through freelance work, but spends their days hiking mountains, reading books, and cooking meals under the stars. They're not escaping reality. They're rewriting it. Moral. Freedom is not the ability to buy anything. It's the ability to walk away from everything you don't need. To performative wealth, the trap of looking rich versus being rich. Too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want, to impress people they don't like. Will Rogers. In the age of Instagram, wealth has become theater, designer bags, exotic vacations, 5-star dinners. But often what we see isn't prosperity, it's pressure. Credit card debt in disguise, status anxiety in a filter. True wealth rarely needs validation. It whispers, it doesn't perform. A Silicon Valley executive drives a Toyota Corolla. He wears no branded clothes. He never posts about his earnings. Meanwhile, his neighbor posts every brunch and designer shoe but is living paycheck to paycheck. The difference? One lives for approval. The other lives for peace. Moral. When needing to appear rich replaces becoming truly secure, you trade long-term freedom for short-term validation. Mental load of scarcity. How the brain shuts down in survival mode. Poverty taxes the mind more than it taxes the wallet. Sendil Mullainathan, author of Scarcity. When you need money, your cognitive bandwidth narrows. Research shows that people under financial stress perform worse on problem-solving tasks, equivalent to losing 10 to 15 IQ points. It's not about intelligence, it's about survival pressure. Scarcity robs your attention. You can't think long-term, be creative, or plan for the future when your brain is stuck in, how will I pay rent next week? A single mom working 2 jobs doesn't lack ambition. She lacks space. Space to dream, to breathe, to think beyond bills. Now compare that to a trust fund kid who has endless bandwidth to start companies, invest, or create. This is why poverty becomes generational, not because people are lazy, but because chronic scarcity limits their choices. Moral. Need doesn't just impact your wallet. It hijacks your mind. The ethics of wealth. Why some refuse to chase. It is no measure of health to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Jiddu Krishnamurti. What if some people choose not to pursue money? Not because they're lazy, but because they're making a moral decision. In a world where wealth is often built on exploitation, of labor, of the planet, of inequality, there are individuals who reject the race altogether. They refuse to step on others to climb higher. A brilliant coder chooses to work for a non-profit rather than Silicon Valley. A doctor sets up a free rural clinic instead of chasing private hospital bonuses. An artist lives on little but uses their work to heal communities. These people may not have much in material terms, but their lives are full of meaning, relationships, peace. And sometimes that wealth is more powerful than $1 billion in the bank. Moral. Sometimes not chasing money is not a failure. It's a rebellion. Absolutely. Here are 5 more deeply detailed points to expand your long-form YouTube video on people who don't need money have the most. People who need money have the least. These will enrich the structure, emotion, and insight of the full piece. Each is crafted in the voice of modern philosophy, supported by real-world reflection and psychological insight. Needlessness as a superpower. The Stoic advantage. He is richest who is content with the least. Socrates. There is a strength in needing nothing. The Stoics weren't poor. They were powerful. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, had access to the wealth of an empire, yet practiced simplicity as if he owned nothing. Why? Because only when you free yourself from needing do you become unbreakable. When your happiness is not for sale, when your peace doesn't rely on promotion, luxury, or applause, you move through life untouchable. You negotiate better, love more honestly, and sleep better. A business owner turns down $1 million deal because it compromises his values. Why? He doesn't need it. He'd rather stay small and free than scale and suffer. His detachment gives him leverage that desperation never could. Moral. The less you need, the less control the world has over you. The downward spiral of desperation. How needing creates vulnerability. Needing money doesn't just limit choices. It invites predators. When people are desperate, they take high-interest loans. They fall for scams. They join pyramid schemes. They take jobs that exploit them, tolerate bosses who demean them, and sell pieces of themselves they wish they didn't have to. The need turns into a trap, and the trap becomes a cycle. A young woman in debt joins a multi-level marketing company that promises freedom. A year later, she's poorer, emotionally drained, and embarrassed. The system didn't fail her. It fed on her. Moral. Those who need the most often have the least, not because they're incapable, but because the system profits from their need. The geography of need. Why the poor pay more for everything. It's expensive to be poor. James Baldwin. This isn't just a metaphor. Statistically, people in lower-income communities pay more for food, housing, transportation, even credit. Poor neighborhoods have fewer grocery stores and more expensive corner shops. Rent-to-own furniture stores charge triple the price of a couch. Payday lenders charge APRs in the hundreds. Cheap cars break down more often, costing more in the long run. The irony? The poorer you are, the more everything costs. A wealthy person can buy a $2,000 laptop outright. A working-class person buys it with interest and late fees, eventually paying $3,500 for the same machine. Moral. Those who need the most are penalized at every step, not because of how little they have, but because of how the system is designed. Wealth as stillness. Why those who don't need are at peace. There's a kind of wealth you can't count, stillness. It's found in people who aren't in a hurry, who eat slowly, who aren't refreshing their email at midnight, who can walk through a store and not feel pulled by 1,000 tiny cravings, who can sit with themselves in silence, domun, and feel full. They may not be rich on paper, but they have something many billionaires don't. Peace of mind. A retired teacher lives in a cottage, tends a garden, and spends her evenings reading philosophy. She's not on social media. She doesn't check the markets, but if you ask her, she'll say, "I have everything I need." Moral. True wealth is the ability to sit in stillness and feel no lack, needing less to give more, the generosity of the undesperate. The paradox, the people who need money the least are often the ones who give the most. Because they aren't ruled by fear. Because they have enough, and that enough makes room for others. They sponsor kids, start foundations, donate anonymously, not for tax write-offs, but because they can. Because they're not obsessed with more. A man living simply on $30,000 a year donates 10% to local education charities. His neighbor, a millionaire, gives nothing, always saying, "Maybe next year." Who's richer? Moral. The heart that doesn't clutch is the one most capable of generosity. Shifting the mindset of wealth. So where does this all leave us? We live in a world that screams more. More success, more followers, more income, more hustle. But the deepest truths whisper, less. Less need, less comparison, less fear. Those who don't need money, truly, often attract the most. Why? Because they are not trying to fill a hole. They are already whole. They are not controlled by desperation. They are powered by direction. They are not stuck in survival mode. They are guided by soul mode. This is not just about wealth. It's about sovereignty. About who you become when you are no longer enslaved by needing. When you create, love, serve, build, not from fear, but from fullness. In the words of Noam Chomsky, real freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want, but the ability to live without domination. So the next time you look at someone who has it all, ask, do they really? Or are they just really good at pretending? And when you look at your own life, don't ask, how much do I have? Ask, how much do I need to be at peace? Because once you let go of needing more, you may find you already have everything.